Are you ready to unmute your power? Are you sick and tired of being told to shut up? Welcome to Something to Say with me, Shae, because silence is no longer an option. This is not just a podcast, it's a revolution. This is for the women who are done tolerating mediocrity, done biting their tongues, and done playing small. With bold truths and unfiltered insights, I'll help you rip off that proverbial muzzle, put your stake in the ground, and take back the power you were told to suppress. You were never meant to be silent. The world is waiting to hear your voice. It's time to speak up, and speaking up starts now. Welcome back to Something to Say. I'm your host, Shae. Today, we are talking about disrupting default. And if you know me at all, you know I love disrupting things, especially the status quo. Let's be real. How many of us are walking through life half asleep? We've checked the boxes. We've built the careers. We've hit the milestones that society tells us we're supposed to. But when we pause long enough to listen and get still, something feels off. Success on paper is not the same as success in your soul. And I know this all too well, and it's why I left corporate after working my butt off to get where I got. But when I finally reached that level where I felt I finally belonged, the level I knew I was capable of, when I got there, I realized how unfulfilled I was. Not just unfulfilled, but deeply unhappy. And no amount of money could fill that emptiness. And that's exactly what today's conversation is about, breaking free from conditioning, waking up to a life that's fulfilling and joyful. And although I wasn't on autopilot in my career progression, in fact, I felt like I was ambitiously steering that ship to a goal, and I did a damn good job doing that, I was still operating from a place of societal definitions of success, conditioning. And I have been reprogramming myself for over a year now because of all that conditioning. So today we're going to talk about ditching that default mode and choosing a life that feels deeply aligned with your soul. My guest today knows this world inside and out. Hema Crockett spent over 2 decades climbing the corporate ladder, leading at the executive level, and then she flipped the script. Through her signature methodology, she helps successful professionals recalibrate their lives, break free from conditioning, and create sustainable success that actually feels good. What I love about Hema's approach is that it's not about more noise or quick fixes or chasing the next shiny thing. She is all about silence, root causes, and transformation that actually lasts. Hema, welcome to the show. I am so excited you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. Me too. I love conversations like this.
Me too. Me too. So let's start with your journey. How did you realize that you were in default mode, and what led you to start living more intentionally?
Yeah. So when you were sharing a little bit about your story, I was nodding yes, because same is all I have to say. So, by way of background, I spent about 18 years in corporate America, and I thought that is what you had to do. I thought you stayed in corporate America, you worked your way up. I was the person who switched jobs probably every 3 to 4 years because I get bored.
Yeah.
But also I worked in a lot of startups. And so with startups, that's just what you do. It's kind of a high risk, high reward type of a game.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say about 8 years ago, I just thought, what am I doing? This doesn't even feel good anymore. And truth be told, I had taken a bit of a hiatus from corporate America for about, 3.5, 4 years. So my husband and I moved internationally, and we lived in Kathmandu, Nepal. And I think that was the first time for me where I was like, what do you mean life is slower? I don't understand. I was used to working 70 hours a week. And, I kid you not, 4 months prior to that, I was being wheeled into the emergency room via ambulance. And this, I'm going to date myself for a second. BlackBerry stuck in my hand we can't go into surgery yet. I have a meeting and I need to attend it.
Oh my gosh.
And my husband looking at me and looking at the doctor, like, is she Is she serious right now? I don't really know what to say. And so, fast forward 4 months, we left, we moved to Nepal. I realized life can slow down. When we eventually came back to the US, I took some time off. I took about 6 months off before I decided I wanted to jump right back into work because I wanted to be intentional.
Hmm.
We live in a society that doesn't understand how to slow down. And it becomes very easy to go right back to working 50, 60, 70 hours. And that's exactly what I did. I
Hmm.
think it took me, 6 months or less after getting back into it to go right back to where I vowed never to be. And I continued on
Yeah.
that hamster wheel until the last startup that I was with. And I realized I think a switch just flipped. I don't know what
Uh,
it was. I think I just hit my limit. And I
mm,
realized I'm done. I am
yeah.
just done with this. And I started my first company at that time, partnered with a colleague. We continued building and growing. And so even in that journey, I realized I there was a point in part of that journey where my husband and I were trying to have kids. And you talk about conditioning and we talk about default and we talk about autopilot. And I think for me, my journey really, really started down this path during COVID, but not because of COVID.
Mm,
It
mhm.
started because my husband and I were told the only way for us to have children was via IVF.
Okay.
And so we thought, okay, so then, you go through IVF and he's sitting in the car because it's COVID. And I continue to get egg retrievals and I did one transfer. And during that transfer, I'm sitting there and I thought, oh, okay, I don't want kids.
Oh,
And it was like the biggest light bulb moment of like, I
wow.
won't
Yeah.
swear, but there was like quite a few words in the middle of that. And he's sitting in the car and I'm like, okay, step one, I need to go tell him that not only has the transfer taken place, but I have now realized I don't want children. So I get in the car and I tell him, and he's like, oh, yeah, me neither. And I was like, how did we
What?
get here? How
Wow.
did we get here? And that was literally the start of me burning it down. And that's now been
Wow.
about like 4.5 years.
Amazing. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Wow. Well,
Yeah.
thank goodness you were both on the same page there.
It was,
Um,
it was late, but I mean, we got there.
yeah.
We got there. And truth be told, it was because we never asked ourselves this question, what do we
Yeah.
want? We
Right.
made the assumption that we had to have children because our parents wanted us to have children,
Yep.
society wanted us to have children because you've been married long enough. I was getting up there in age. So you kind of have all of this conditioning that's thrown on you, and you're going through the motions without ever stopping to think, wait, I have to raise that child. Do I even want that child?
Exactly. Yeah, we don't question.
We
And we
don't
often
question
don't
it.
question. We don't think about if we want. We just, yeah, same. I had children young. I got married at 21. My first child was born when I was 23.
Oh,
And
wow.
but I didn't want children before that. I didn't want the responsibility. I didn't want to potentially raise them in an abusive or toxic home like
Hmm.
I was raised in. I just didn't. But yeah, we were married for a year and a half. So I'm like, I guess that's the next thing we do.
It's life's
And
order of operations, right?
yes,
You get
why?
married, you have
Yeah.
kids.
And why do you think these patterns of autopilot living are so common, especially for women?
Yeah, I think it goes back to our conditioning, whether
Yeah.
that's familial conditioning because our mothers or our grandmothers were kind of raised in the same place and therefore intentionally or unintentionally
Yeah.
kept pushing that narrative. Cultural conditioning plays a role in that. You're supposed to be married by a certain age, depending on your culture, then you're supposed to have children at a young age, and all of these things. Then for women, you add gender and societal conditioning on top of that, and it's a
Yeah.
recipe for disaster at the end of the day. And we
Hmm.
lived that way for so many years until we finally, many of us wake up. Some of us sadly don't because the conditioning is so deep. And
Hmm.
I think what it does is it then fuels our inner dialogue. And it becomes part of our story, even though we've never stopped to pause and ask ourselves, wait, do I even believe that? Is
Yeah,
that true for me? So I
right.
think we then perpetuate those cycles and we then start thinking about those beliefs, putting them on our children or that next generation.
This is why I love the word disrupting, because
Yep,
it's just like taking a line of program and just adding a question mark at the
that's
end,
it.
right? It's like, but does it have to be this way? Can
Yep.
I change this program? Can I change this belief? For me, because I started working at 16, I always wanted to make my own money. I had my taste of own money like when I was
Mm,
8, and I went to a lake with a friend, and my parents gave me some money, and I loved paying for what I wanted to eat and what I wanted to buy with that. Like, so I was like hooked on I want to make my own money.
yeah,
And I've only known how to do that through the container of corporate America. And for the last year and a half, I have been trying other things, more creative, more using my gifts and talents.
hmm,
And it's been a struggle because I know what I can make in corporate and I have those skills down pat. And I'm doing everything in my power not to go back to that and make it work doing something else. What do you think? What's your opinion on that?
yeah.
On
There's
those
a money
containers?
story. There's a
Yeah.
money story there for sure. And
Hmm.
and I think that getting to the root cause of what has you thinking like that, where money is, let's just say, at the forefront of the thinking versus the freedom to actually pursue a passion, regardless of what the financial outcome or output is. I
Hmm.
think there is, if you were to think back over time, it becomes almost this conversation of looking back. If you were to take yourself back, where was the first money conversation that you ever had?
Mm.
Where was money talked about in your house? Or was it a taboo topic because you were a child and children don't need to know
Right.
about money? Therefore,
Right.
we don't talk about it. And therefore, I want to make my own so I don't have to rely on other people to
Oh
give
yeah.
me money, to sustain me. So I
Yeah.
think those containers and those stories all originate somewhere. We didn't just come up with them.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's about what our fears are in those moments, right?
Hmm.
And I think for a lot of us, when we leave corporate, we think about, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. I was secure. I had a financially stable job. It wasn't going anywhere. But were we
Hmm.
really happy at the end of
Right.
the day? And I think sometimes we fall back on what society tells us makes us happy versus what actually makes us happy. And I think
Hmm.
if we start to peel back some of those fears and we really open the door, open the lid to that container, we start to think those were stories I was told. That's
Right.
not my story, right? So
Right.
we disrupt at that point in time. Otherwise,
Yes.
we all have a choice. We can continue living that story, which has nothing to do with us, or you can choose to change. Either way, you're now actively making a choice because once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right. Oh, I love that. Yeah. On the surface, it doesn't always look harmful, but the real cost of living in
Huge.
default mode, what does that look like? How does that manifest?
Yeah, I love this question because it is actually part of the coaching that I do with Recalibrate. We spend time talking about the cost
Mm. Hmm.
because the cost is different for everybody, but I kid you not, it costs us something no matter what, right? I was
Right.
unhappy in corporate America for many years, but I was scared to make a change until one day I just did it.
Yeah.
I could always go back if things didn't work 8 years later. I'm not going back, but it
Hmm.
was always there. And so I think that cost is multifold. I think as we look back on our lives when we're 90, 95 years old and we think, I should have done that. I regret not doing that. We're
Hmm.
going to think about the things we didn't do versus thinking, oh gosh, I loved corporate so much. I should have stayed forever. That I can't imagine that being a thought for somebody.
I
You
can't
know,
either.
or I should have stayed in that relationship because it sucked so terribly. Like, all of these things. I
Exactly.
think there's a cost. And I think the biggest cost that especially us as women pay is the mental cost. We carry it with us wherever we go, and it truly colors our perspective on everything.
Hmm. I agree. I completely agree. And it has a ripple effect,
Yes.
right? It's not just mental, but then your body then starts to show signs of unhappiness or dis-ease, right? That it's
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
it's just a huge ripple effect and it affects every angle of your life if we're not happy. And so
Absolutely.
you bring something really unique to your work, which is spiritual awareness. And I am a spiritual junkie. I love spirituality. It's been the thing that gets me through. So what role does that play? Um, and how does it change the way you help your clients?
Yeah, it is critical to the work that I actually do. And I did that purposely because it was through spiritual work that I was able to really uncover my patterns and to really start, I think, breaking that shell, right? Coming home to myself at the end of the day. And that meant release. And we can't release in a noisy world. And
Mhm.
so the way that the spiritual practice really comes in is first getting centered. This is about breathing and being present, not about thinking about where we just came from or where we're going. But I
Mhm.
think also it's about listening to the silence. And we spend a lot of time in silence in the work that I do. And that's because in that silence, the thoughts are there, they're flowing, they're coming up. And for the first time, you've quieted all the noise.
Mm.
And I think part of what makes the work special is that once you start digging, because part of the work is really going backwards in order to go forwards. It's understanding your conditioning, understanding your patterns. And
Mhm.
as you start digging, when we're not together in session, it's still going in your brain, it's still coming out. And so the spiritual work is really there because in order for you to really make a change in life, you have to pause and you have to be intentional about
Yeah.
what you want to do. And you also have to really get uncomfortable. And I think meditation, sitting in silence, pausing is very uncomfortable in a society that is constantly on.
Mhm.
And I create this void that exists between letting go of who you were before we actually get to who you want to be. And in that void is the most magical time and the most, I think, complaints that I get from people, which is like, that was awkward. I hated it. And it did so much good for me at the end of the day.
Mm.
And I
Ooh.
think, yeah, and what I love about it is it opens people's eyes to what spirituality can really be. Again, separate from religion, separate from, any of these other teachings. It's
Right.
really about you. What do you believe? How do you want to be in this world? Not what do you want to do? How do you
Right.
want to be in this world?
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. And creating that void, I feel like I've been in that space,
Yeah.
forced on upon me by the universe to be in a void
Right.
for like a year and a half. And it's really like I talk about like it's not a matter of becoming, it's almost unbecoming
Yep.
all the masks, all the
Yep.
conditioning and kind of letting those things fall away
Yep.
and then saying who am I now without this job, without this title, without this money? Who am I
Yep.
now? And it's really getting to that space of then reinventing yourself without all those things.
Yep.
And
100%.
yeah, and it's scary and it's enlightening and it's uh amazing at the same time.
It is. And it's hard to think about what life was like prior once you're on the other side.
Yeah.
And you start to see things very differently. But I think you also not only give yourself grace in that, you start to give other people grace because you start to realize the stories and the burdens and the baggage that everybody is carrying with them.
Mm.
And so
Hmm.
not only has your perspective changed on your own life, but it's also changed in how you're viewing life around you. And I think you approach it from a much bigger mindset than you originally did when you were kind of tunnel visioning on autopilot for so many years.
Yes. So you give people strategies, you're helping them transform at the root level.
Yeah,
Um, can you walk us through how you support women in that process,
absolutely.
aside from the void, taking them into a void?
Absolutely. So The practice is called recalibrate. And I call it a practice because we're never actually done with the work. Let's
Mm,
start there. You don't reach this place and you're like, oh, I'm perfect. I'm done. Time to move on. There's always something else to uncover, to unpack, and to keep going with.
true.
And I also call it recalibrate because I inherently believe that everybody's whole at the end of the day. We just have to refine our North Star.
Mm,
And so, to the point that you made, this really is about who am I when I drop all the shoulds, the musts, when I drop everything I was told and taught to be. How do I return home to myself? How do I unbecome all of those things?
yeah.
And in order to unbecome those things, where I start in my practice is really at the beginning. We go backwards. I want to understand what is that conditioning. I have a questionnaire that really kicks it off because sometimes people need that quiet space to really reflect and to think about their lives and what got them to this point. But
Mhm.
it's really about discovering all of your conditioning, your limiting beliefs and your biases, and then talking about cost because there is always a cost at the end of the day.
Yeah.
What has it held us back from doing? What has it held us back from achieving? However, we
Mm,
want to define that word. And then I really go into deconstructing our lives, right? And that sounds scary, but it's really this idea of, gosh, if I didn't have that, would I be okay? If that belief was no longer there, could I survive? And the answer
mm,
for most of our beliefs, about 99%, is absolutely. Absolutely, I could survive, but they've served as a protection mechanism. They've kept us safe from something. So then it's the active process of letting go. So I work with women to really, how do we let go of what those things are before we even get to that void? And then we really reconstruct. Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? And then we work through what those baby steps are. This isn't about uprooting your entire life. This isn't about quitting your job and moving to a tiny island in Tahiti. It's none of those things. It is
mm,
how can you create sustainable practices for the world that we live in today? So it really is about creating sustainability from a human perspective and creating a life that feels authentic to who we are and how we want to show up in the world.
I love that. We have
Thank you.
when I read your story and your website, I was like, we're so alike. We're so aligned. And my coaching practice, very similar.
Oh,
Like
I love it.
if I broke it down for you, I'm not really doing it anymore, but if I broke it down, it'd be very similar to that. So I love that. I love the work that you're doing. So for
Thank
someone
you.
listening right now who knows that they're running on autopilot, what are one or two small things they can start doing today to disrupt the default and then live more intentionally?
Yeah, I would say step one, which can be hard, but just create space for silence. 5 minutes. Just start with 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. And it can be sitting outside with your phone in the house, just listening to nature. That's it. You don't even need equipment for that. Just stand outside if you don't have anywhere to sit. Doesn't matter. But it's finding that space for intentional silence is number one.
Mhm.
And then number two, what I would say is pay attention. So the language we use matters. So pay attention when you find yourself making a decision from an I should do this or I must do this. Or if it's not perfect, I can't put it out into the world. And just take note of those things. It's not about deconstructing what they are, where they come from right now. It's just simply building the awareness that they exist because those things are building our perspective of the world and they're building our stories, whether we know it or not.
Mhm. That is beautiful. And I can attest, spending time in silence is probably the most life-changing
Yep.
practice I've ever had.
Yeah.
It's where the messages come in. It's where the insights, the intuitive hits, it's the nudges from the universe, right? And
Yep.
if we listen to that, but it's also hearing yourself maybe say some things that you know are not really your story, but it's embedded in there And that's the quiet time where you can question those things. You can put that question mark at the end of the program.
Exactly. You disrupt it right there. And I
Right
think to
there.
this point, this voice, I think it's also important to remember that you are the listener of that voice. You are not the voice. So there are
Yeah.
two different things that are happening. So if we make that distinction, then that inner critic or that negative voice is actually outside of our body. It is not us at the end of the day.
Yeah. So just witnessing
That's
that
it.
voice. Yeah,
That
that's
is it.
huge. Well, this was so powerful, Hema. Thank you for
Thank you.
bringing your wisdom and your fire to this conversation. It's really just truly amazing. For everyone listening, here's what I want you to take away. You don't have to keep sleepwalking through your life. You can disrupt the default. You can wake up. You can choose a life that doesn't just look good, it feels good. And if you want to connect with Hema, connect through her website, which is what, Hema?
Yeah, so it's hemacrockett.com. It's HEMACROCKETT.com or Instagram or LinkedIn as well.
And I'm sorry I mispronounced your
Uh,
name. I just realized
you're
Hema.
totally fine.
Thank you. Okay. So trust me, she is someone you definitely want to work with. As always, thank you for listening. And until next time, keep living wide awake. Thank you so much. You've been listening to Something to Say with me, Jamie Shae, because silence is no longer an option. Catch me live every first and third Wednesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, on transformationtalkradio.com to learn how you too can rip off your proverbial muzzle. Silence was never your destiny. It's time to speak up. Subscribe to my channel to listen first when new episodes drop. Follow me on social media and visit guidedbyjamie.com to join the community that has something to say.